Okay.
Okay, we're ready to go. Okay. I guess is everyone, is there any late items?
No, there were not.
Okay, and do we have any guests?
We do not.
Oh, good. Okay, makes it easier.
Good stuff.
Okay, and then everybody's okay with the agenda? Do I have to? Okay.
Yeah,
do I have to have a motion on that? Remind me when I have to have motions.
Well, yeah, you should. It should be. Yeah, you should carry it unanimously, or.
Okay. Do I have a nominator?
Yeah, I'll move that the agenda be approved as distributed.
Okay, and Betty?
Second.
Second, okay. And okay, now we have the minutes. Did everyone read the minutes?
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone want to move that they're okay? As read or as in the agenda? Okay. That's Richard. Seconded.
Betty.
Okay. Now,
it's a point of order that you normally vote on motions. I don't know how important that is, but
okay, yeah, no, you're right. Okay. I would have thought this through if I knew I was going to be the chair.
Fair enough.
Okay. Are we okay with not voting? Shall I go back?
Let's just approve both of them.
Okay. Both of you, everybody? Hands?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. And now no public. So now we're going to go into the council referrals, and it's 1360 Mount Gardner Road. And who's doing that? Daniel or?
Drew will do that.
Drew. Okay. Do you want to
share my screen now? All right, thank you guys. And so this report is to introduce a rezoning application for 1360 Mount Gardner Road. This was introduced to council at their regular meeting on October 15th, and then was referred to this committee as well as the Housing Advisory Committee and the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee for a recommendation. And this is a rezoning and OCP amendment application to rezone 1360 Mount Gardner Road from a rural residential 3 to a settlement residential 1C zoning, and from an official community plan designation of currently the rural residential to a designation that allows potential subdivision. And this OCP designation has not yet been determined since no applicable OCP designation exists for this lot size. So we have to create a new designation. The site is just over 3 acres or 1.25 hectares in size, and currently has a single family dwelling with multiple accessory buildings. The property is not serviced by community water or sewer. The proposed rezoning would allow a subdivision of the property into 2 lots. The existing residence would become the principal residence of the west lot, with a new single family dwelling intended for the east lot. The applicant, Rosie Montgomery, has explained that she has resided on Bowen Island for 50 years, most recently with the mortgage of the property having come to term and the bank having considerably increased the rates. The costs of remaining on the property have become prohibitively expensive, so the applicant intends to sell the newly formed property to acquire the funds necessary to allow her to continue living in the house that her late husband built for her and her children. Under the land use bylaw, the current RR3 zoning permits unserviced lots with a minimum average lot area of 2 hectares and a minimum lot area of 1 hectare. The proposed subdivision would split the lots into 0.57 hectare portions. Therefore, the proposed zoning designation is SR1C. So that's an existing zone variation of the SR1 zone, and that permits a minimum and average lot area of 0.4 hectares for unserviced lots. Under the official community plan, the current RS designation allows unserviced lots with minimum average parcel size of 1 hectare. And so considering the proposed lot sizes of, again, 0.57 hectares, so the property then needs to be converted to a different OCP designation. As I mentioned, one currently doesn't exist for a lot of that size, so we need to create a new one. but where are we here? So regarding surrounding properties, let me just back up so we can actually see. They're also within the R3 zoning and the RS OCP designation. And there's around a dozen properties south of Bolton Road that are within the zone variation SR1C, which allows the lot sizes as small as 0.4 hectares. So just pointing that out because that's the same zone variation that they're applying for on the subject property. Regarding amenity contributions, two policies are typically discussed during rezoning, the conservation development policy and the affordable housing policy. So neither are overly applicable here. The conservation development policy asks for a designation of at least 50% of the land to be protected from further development. That would defeat the purpose here, where the whole intent is to carry out new development on the unoccupied half of the property. I will note the applicants discussed possible contribution of there's undeveloped area at the rear of the lot, and that was more like a kind of half acre or 2/3 of an acre sized area, so it doesn't meet the 50%, but yeah, there was something there. As for the affordable housing policy, this encourages a range of housing types with an affordability component included. And so at this time, there are no specific plans for the future new residents. So its design, as well as the possible inclusion of a secondary suite, would come down to the decision of the new owner. And that's about all. Thank you, guys. I'll turn this over to the commission for discussion.
Okay, thanks, Drew.
Can
You
you
guys want
go
to
Can you go back to the first slide? It sort of looked like the house takes up the whole lot. No, I must be the second one. Yeah, that one. So that blue line is the proposed housing line on the lot she would sell to somebody?
That's just showing the setback area. So where buildings
okay,
will be placed.
Okay, not the house outline. The setback makes sense. Okay. I don't really have a problem with this. It's sort of, falls under the affordable housing concept that, making quite large lots into something a little smaller makes them more accessible for more people.
Okay, anyone else have any comments?
I'm generally in agreement with it as well. Given, the length of time she's lived on the island and financial need, I think that should be weighed into the decision.
Can I ask why?
Yeah,
That matters?
just my feeling on it.
Yeah. Have the neighbors had anything to say, Drew?
We haven't done public notification yet, so after second reading, we'll be hitting the public hearing stage. So yeah, we as a municipality will hold one typically at the municipal hall, and then the applicant also will hold a public information meeting typically on site. So that's when we'll be doing the big push for public notification.
Okay, so it's well and septic on these lots. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And where is the access road to the back?
So currently, so this will be kind of a change of. So let me see if I got a more. Doesn't really help. Well, you can see a little bit more here. Are you guys able to see my mouse over the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, in this area here, that's in the past. Over the history, most of the history of Rosie living on this property, it's been accessed through this other lot, which Rosie used to own. That has now been closed as of recently, and they've built a new access that kind of snakes down the property here, and it has to be a switchback because it's such a steep property. So that would have a right of way or an easement. It would be a shared access between the two lots. Actually, sorry, I should show the site. Let's see. I recall it was on the site plan, but I think it's just too. It was just a dotted line or something. I'm not.
Yeah, it's Deirdre, but it's very faint.
Okay, yeah, I can't see anything right now. But yeah, so they do show it on the site plan anyways. So yeah, it'll be a shared access for both properties, and yeah, yeah, we wouldn't be able to do a panhandle lot because yeah, to have one straight to have just one straight lane wouldn't work since it's so steep. So yeah, it seems like the shared access is the way to go.
Okay, and that would be the seller's responsibility to lay all that on before it was done?
Yeah, I think we'd be requiring that as the municipality. Right, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, that would be something that would be like, in order to subdivide to create the lots into two, it would have to be showing how the legal access is being provided for the top lot. So if that's a common access over the lower lot, it would be registered and in place prior to the subdivision completing.
And what about water, well and septic? Is that required to be?
Yes, so again, it's like to subdivide the additional lot, you'd have to prove water, and you would have to satisfy coastal health's septic guidelines. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, typically that means on Bowen, it's like you need to show that you have a type 1 sized field and reserve field and adequate soils to service those.
Okay,
I have a couple questions.
go ahead.
Thanks. So I thought I remembered in something coming before council requiring an OCP amendment in the last few months, and there being a comment from council about how we should not be doing any OCP amendments at this point when our OCP is about to be reviewed and amended. Am I remembering that incorrectly?
So this year, we've brought 3 different applications that are all rezoning OCP amendment to be able to subdivide one lot into 2. So the first one I brought was on Hummingbird Lane. It was 883 or 881 Hummingbird. And at that point, council referred that to the OCP review and said we weren't willing to proceed with that application in advance of the OCP review. Council, I believe my memory in that meeting is council made a motion, a councillor made a motion about not proceeding with any OCP applications, and they debated it, and I think the councillor withdrew it, but so essentially they didn't proceed on that basis. And then we've since brought the application on Collins Road that we talked about in July, and then this one, we've had 2 different ones where council has said we're willing to proceed with these OCP amendments in advance of an OCP review. So council is like aware that that's an option, but is sort of taking it on a application at a time stage. I mean, I remember when I brought the Collins Road one, yeah, some of their big discussion was like the Hummingbird one was quite a bit denser than the neighborhood as a whole. And the Collins Road one, and dividing into 2, the lots would actually end up, fairly comparable to what the neighborhood is. And this one sort of straddles the difference. Like, it's not as dense as the Hummingbird, and it's not as like, oh, even subdivided in 2, they're actually larger than the neighboring lots, like the Collins Road one. This one was kind of in between.
Okay. And my second question is more specific, and that is simply the existing home. I'm assuming that the septic field is probably close to the house, so that's not an issue in terms of where that division line is drawn.
I'm not offhand aware of where their septic field is, but yeah, it would be close to the residents, and they've actually planned for even the septic field for the future lots. So you can see within or inside the blue lines, you can see another like a white box, and that's the proposed house footprint. And then there's another smaller white box that's the proposed area for septic field. So yeah, they've done some, I don't know if full on surveying, but I mean they checked out the property, identified the flatter cleared areas, and identified the areas that are suitable for septic. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one other question about the west lot. Is that adjacent to Crippen Park? The west side of this lot, is that
It's
I-
adjacent to the Crown land at Mount Gardner.
Right.
oh, it's the crown.
Okay,
This one.
Okay. Was there some discussion of there being an existing trail that cut through in that general area. Am I remembering? Okay, it's not ringing a bell with anyone, so. Okay,
I'm looking into a bit of the rezoning that was done, you know, you can see on the zoning map that SR1C portion, you know, south of Bolton Road, and I feel like there's maybe some trail dedications back when that was done. But anyways, yeah, I'm not aware of any trail on this property. So.
okay. That's it from me, thanks.
Okay, well,
Can we
Oh.
just, yeah, I just want to say, like, I don't know, this one's a little hard for me, because I really have a lot of sympathy for the property owner, in this case. And on the other hand, you know, normally when there's going to be like an OCP amendment, in this case, one requiring a completely new designation, there is an amenity contribution of some kind, either by way of affordable housing or a donation under the conservation development policy. And, you know, I don't think that the municipality is getting either one of those in this case. So I'm just wondering if, Drew, if you have any comment about that.
I mean, if there's no space on the property or anything to provide a, you know, a more physical amenity, I mean, financial, you know, contribution in lieu, that's an option, isn't it, Daniel?
That would be an option. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by that, you mean a financial contribution?
Yeah.
That's right.
So we do have some precedents of that. Like I know, I think it's the Arbutus Ridge development. They made a contribution at time of they made a commitment or offered the amenity at time of rezoning to provide. And at the time it was actually funding for a Bowen Community Center. And then essentially then it's covenanted on when each new lot is created, that's when the contribution is made.
that's a substantially larger piece of property, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget what the numbers are because it was, so many 100,000 total, but it ends up being like somewhere between 10 and 15,000 a lot that they contribute.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts are I see nothing wrong with subdividing properties if they aren't going to be a burden on the municipal services and they've got water and sewer and stuff. But I think we need to be fair with not just approving some people's subdivision requests and making other people cough up money or whatever. I don't believe in the coughing up money or the 50% part personally, but I think we need to be careful that we are fair to any likely proponents of subdivision would be my thought. And I don't know whether the OCP is going to allow for any more reasonable small subdivisions or not. I have no idea what the OCP is going to do, the new OCP, but that's my concern, is that we need to make sure that we're fair and not just saying yes to some people and no to others.
Yeah, I get that. And I worry about, when one situation, when one application such as this one, where, I think we're all very sympathetic. It's like that creates a precedent. And I think you can expect, or at least I would expect that it may lead to other people asking for exceptions, particularly to the conservation development policy, which I thought was something that council was standing pretty strongly behind as being mandatory. and I'd be interested to hear comments about that if I'm remembering that incorrectly. If we make an exception here, then that will lead to others asking for the same consideration to be granted. So I think it's a variation, Kirsty, of what you're saying.
Has that conversation been had with the proponent? Or, I mean, I agree with you, Brenda, that I understood that was just the convention for all of them, but I thought that the owner would be invited to consider how they could meet that requirement.
Yeah, good question.
Has that been talked about yet, Drew?
I haven't discussed financial contributions with them, I don't think. Mainly we just talked about, you know, that's when they brought up, I discussed the conservation development policy, and that's when they brought up, you know, the half acre or 2/3 of an acre at the back of the property that could be contributed, but again, that it doesn't meet the 50%. But no, I haven't discussed the financial option with them.
When you say that half acre or whatever it is at the back of the property, would that have like a conservation value of some kind? Is that the part that would be adjacent to, like, where would it be on this diagram? What would it be next to?
Just, if you can see my mouse, yeah, just pretty much the
Yep.
back end behind the garage here. Yeah, you can see it's still forested back there and undeveloped.
And that area is about 2/3 of an acre.
Like, yeah, I measured about half acre to the 2/3.
Hmm.
I mean, it's kind of tough to see on the air photo exactly what's forested or not, but yeah, you got about that half acre to 2/3.
I thought the property was only just over a hectare.
Just 3
Uh,
acres, I think, or it's 1.2 something.
Yeah, it's just over 3 acres or 1.25 hectares.
Okay. Well, does anyone have some thoughts about what we want to feedback to council?
I have a draft. If you want me to bring up the draft, you can.
Sure.
Yeah. Drew, would you mind if
Oh,
I can
no,
share?
sure.
Thanks. Okay, is that working?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's this first one. And can everyone see it properly?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I think we're sort of all over the place on this. So is there,
I can take a crack at it.
yeah.
To me, it seems what I'm hearing is that we are generally supportive, provided that there is some contribution of green space made that would be compliant with the conservation development policy. Or I'm not sure if that's quite the right wording, because we know that the goal of the conservation development policy is a minimum of 50%, and we know that's not doable, but that would be at least partially compliant with the conservation development policy. Is that a fair way to summarize that?
I guess, yeah, that's not my, I don't have a problem with no green space amenity donation at all. I just have a problem with exceptions due to, X or Y. It's more, I think we need to make a consistent policy of, if we're going to look at something, it shouldn't just be because somebody says they have some financial issues. I'm sure many people on the island have financial issues. And I don't think that it's right to push forward one property versus another. That's my, I think that we need to be open-minded to everybody. If they want to make money or they can't afford to, it really should be nothing to do with us. Is it the right thing for Bowen Island? And that's where it should be on, is this the right thing for Bowen Island?
Yeah, I agree with that, Kirsty, and I also agree with your reasoning, Brenda, on the contribution. The green space. First of all, the property itself is it's a big property. It's 3 acres or 1 point whatever hectares. So a lot of that area is currently not being used for housing. We need more housing on the island. It doesn't seem unreasonable to divide it in half. Those are still big lots, granted a little bit smaller than the zoning in the area, but they're still large lots. The green space itself, I don't know what benefit there is to the community. It's not really accessible.
Yeah.
It's adjacent to Crown land. In this, and the requirement for 50% can't be met. So it may be more reasonable to request a contribution in lieu of having green space to donate. I think I would lean more in that direction.
I think that's probably more up to council to decide. I think that us saying that we think we should stand behind our conservation development policy and affordable housing policy is good feedback. One could argue, the direction that Conservancy is taking right now, they're talking about biodiversity, and that doesn't necessarily mean, a park or a hiking trail. It might be just green spaces, as you called it. And I also agree with you that making a little bit smaller lots available is actually compliant with the idea of encouraging more affordable housing, that everybody doesn't need a 10-acre property, that we can provide smaller properties. So I think that's a good idea, and I think it's worth our planning department, working with the client to come up with their own ideas for how they might be able to address both the affordable housing and the conservation development requirements.
Do you have some words that you would like to say?
You didn't write all that down, Sarah.
Well, maybe can we start with, are we all on board with the idea that yes, smaller lot size we're supportive of? Is that?
Yeah.
We're supportive with the subdivision to smaller lot size to enable more housing on Bowen Island?
Yeah.
Yes. As long
Where
as,
appropriate.
yeah, where that's what I'm stating. It wouldn't be appropriate to divide this into 6 lots, for instance.
Yeah.
No, but in this particular case, so
Right.
this
So
particular,
saying where appropriate, I think qualifies that statement.
well, that it's
properly.
consistent in that neighborhood. There's already lots approximately that size.
Mhm.
Right.
So consistent with the neighboring properties, maybe.
Or, and with the ability for housing to be supported there, like if there wasn't water and septic, I
Right.
think that's pretty critical.
And where,
Services,
Yeah.
can be,
Can
um,
support it.
can support it, yeah. Okay,
this
so that
one,
we're all do it on. I don't know, it was my suggestion, the middle one is, I don't know, is that something that other people feel they're supportive of or not?
I just think it has to be a little more specific. It's not a complete thought right now.
Yeah,
But yes, I think that we should continue to work with the proponents to meet the conservation development policy, and what's the other one called, the 15% or whatever it is for affordable housing.
Affordable housing policy
Yeah,
and
those two,
conservation development policy.
and let them figure out how to do it.
okay, so that's,
do you want to change the,
And maybe instead of saying contribution of, maybe eliminate of green space, because I
Yeah.
think I heard others say that they didn't think green space would necessarily be valuable in that area.
no, it looks like it has a lot of contours. Is it really rocky?
Steep.
It's very steep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so green space.
Do we
I mean, I
need to
think in-
at least partially, or can we just say that it will be compliant with with the existing policies that you've,
Well,
and let council decide if they want to, be tight about how much percentage or not.
well, but we know that it can't be compliant
No,
with
doesn't-
conservation development or the
Unless the-
affordable housing.
well, we don't know about the affordable housing part, but we,
Well, it
they
can't
could-
be with one house on that lot. It's not gonna be affordable.
So, I mean, the affordable housing policy speaks to developments with multiple units
Yeah,
as well. That's when the goal of the 15% is.
yeah,
so we don't need that on this one?
I
Yeah.
don't- I don't think it belongs here.
I was just remembering Cowan Point, so if we don't need it
Yeah.
on this, that's fine.
And I think we should see partially compliant, because I think that we're not gonna be compliant. We've already said it's not gonna be 50%. But it's impossible, like nobody can be compliant with that kind of a,
Large requirement.
yeah,
I mean, I think the policy says, it says, incorporation of principles of conservation development with the goal that a minimum of 50% of the total land is protected. So I mean, I think it's fair to say, yeah, compliant with the conservation development policy, and saying, well, that's the goal. And in this case, most of the site's already developed and has a driveway accessing a house. It's not really. But so in this case, it would be protecting the undisturbed areas on the lot, which is that area uphill of the house. It's like adjacent to crown land. So
by this year?
no,
Yeah.
sorry, Sarah, that was just me
Okay.
talking. You meant
Okay.
that.
because the only way to keep it compliant is to not develop it. Or poke a house on one corner and leave, and everything else has to be left, so.
Yeah, no, you're right, has to be only, or it could only be partially compliant. So
Yeah.
I think it's fair to acknowledge that.
Okay, and,
I don't think as decided, I don't think that's the right word there.
no, that,
We don't
Uh,
really need that.
You don't need that? Okay.
Just put period after policy.
yeah, that sounds
Agreed.
good.
Yeah, that's better.
So I think our second point needs work. I'm not
Yeah.
sure that I understand the point.
I'm not
Well,
sure anymore.
Will we take it out?
Well, I just think that if the, for instance, if the lot next door says they want to do it because they need to make some money, or no, because they'd like to make some money, are we going to say yes to that as opposed to just yes to someone who says they have a mortgage problem?
So maybe that consistency be sought. Whoops, that's not how you spell it.
Yeah, but does that mean that we've got to approve everything from here on in that comes before us because we approved this?
Well, that's what, why wouldn't the neighbors think that we should approve theirs if we approve this one? I agree that we should approve it. It's not that, but I just don't think that we should now say, okay, well, that's one and done in that neighborhood. We're not going to say yes to anybody else's because they don't have a problem, but they don't have a mortgage problem.
But we're
Or
not,
Do you want to?
we're not,
Trustee-
we're not saying anything about their mortgage problem. We're saying that they need to be compliant with conservation development. And we think that it's a solid idea to have a somewhat smaller lot, given there's some in the community. So we're not actually addressing her rationale. I don't think we need to.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think it's an appropriate application regardless.
okay, and we're comfortable that we are going to be fair to the next promote. I just remember, and it's because I've been on this committee too long, that somebody else was going to subdivide their property into 2.5 acre lots because it was which was what surrounded him, and the committee had a problem because he was going to make money. He didn't, he lost it, but you know that.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be very look at ourselves and say, yeah, we're going to be fair to everyone if this is what we're going to do. Anyway, so side of thing, take it out.
Yeah,
Take it out.
I think we need to take each application as it comes, and you know, I don't want to fetter my discretion going forward. So, yeah.
So how about the wording here of this second one? Are we comfortable with that? That bounced around a bit.
Appropriate.
I'm comfortable. Yeah.
I don't think we, yeah, well, I don't know if we need to make a general statement or whether our statement about this this should be more like a statement about this particular application.
So how can we do that as part of,
Or of this, where we can just do the APC is supported of this application as it provides smaller lot
Right.
sizes to an 8, like, so it's we're just putting, how does that?
I'm just going to type it out.
Yeah, so you can, you don't need to retype that. You can just like,
Just copy, yeah.
just,
yeah.
yeah.
Just take from enable now.
just-
No, leave that. And then,
Okay.
okay. And then go to, and then take from enable on the next point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Is everyone
Which-
comfortable with that?
Mm,
Which is.
you could,
Which is appropriate, comma, consistent with neighboring properties and assuming the services can support it.
Yeah.
That makes it
yeah, that's clear.
to this policy or to this application.
Great. Should
So
we,
the-
and I think we should flip these two.
yes. Cool.
Okay, further discussion, or does someone want to
I'll move that we accept the recommendations as we accept these recommendations.
great, thanks,
Or
Brenda.
we-
Seconder?
Put forward these recommendations to council is what I
Betty.
meant to say.
Okay, Betty, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now let me find the agenda again. Okay, our next one. Oh, parking standards, that's you, Daniel. Do you have a
I do
presentation?
have a presentation. Yes, let me just get it going here. All right. So this is a slightly different, this isn't an application, but this is a project from the municipality. This is came out of our Housing Accelerator Fund grant from the provincial or federal government. That it included an action plan that had to identify initiatives that the municipality would undertake to reduce barriers for housing. So one of the action plan items is to review existing parking standards in the land use bylaw with a view to reducing parking requirements for affordable housing multifamily developments. So one of the things we reviewed was what are the current parking standards in the land use bylaw. So generally on Bowen, if you are in a rural zone, so if your zone is like an RR 1, 2, or 3, we require 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And in the settlement zone, so if you're in a settlement residential 1 or 2 zone, we require 1 per dwelling unit. And that's the same in village zones. Our CD zones are a mix of requiring 2 or 1. And then our area 1 of CD19 zone allows half a space per dwelling unit. And a couple
Where
other
is
different
area
standards.
1 CD 19?
It is CD19 is lot 2, and area 1 is where 510 Bowen Island Trunk Road, the apartment building that's built there.
Okay.
And then the other thing we looked at is over the past few, I guess 10 years, council's approved a number of variances to reduce parking in Snug Cove. So the first 2 have been built and the second 2 haven't. But so looking at for the copper distillery project, the parking required was waived primarily for commercial parking requirements and some residential units. Parking was reduced at 510 Bowen Island Trunk Road. So 18 spaces were required, and the variance reduced it to 8, so about 0.29 spaces per unit. And the next 2 haven't been completed yet, but the Birch project 1033 Miller required 24 parking spaces, and the variance reduced it to 10, so 0.4 spaces per unit. And Snug Cove House supportive housing project at 1082 Miller, currently under construction. The zoning would have required 14 parking spaces, and council reduced it by 1 space to 13, or 0.54 spaces per unit. So what the bylaw that's before you would propose is that we would include a definition of affordable housing in our land use bylaw. So essentially mirroring the language that's in the official community plan that defines affordable housing. And it would define it as non-market residential dwelling units that may only be owned or rented under the terms of housing covenants registered on title in favor of the Bowen Island municipality. And it would establish a parking standard of 0.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit that would apply to affordable housing units. And I'll say too that this would only apply in a project to those units that are under the terms of the housing agreement. So typically, as we've required 15% of a development to be affordable, sometimes, so in like 510 Bowen Island Trunk Road, for example, the apartment building, it is 20, I always forget, but I believe it's 27 units, and I believe our housing agreement is on 3 or 4 of the units. So the parking reduction would apply to those units and not to any market units. Whereas a project like the Birch project, where the whole project would be governed by APC housing grant and operating agreement, and the whole project would be under the housing agreement, the reduced parking could apply to all of the units. And just where we are, so this was an action item in our Housing Accelerator Fund. Council, it still says we are here, but council gave first reading to the bylaw in October, I believe, which helped us achieve one of our targets in our housing action plan to help us continue to receive funding. It's been referred to the Islands Trust and the APC, and as well, council at their meeting referred it to additional committees like the Housing Advisory Committee and the Environment Climate Action Committee and the Transportation Committee. So then we would complete those referrals before returning to council with any comments and looking for a second and third reading with potential amendments. So that was the end of my presentation. I'll maybe stop sharing to open it for discussion.
Great, thanks, Daniel. Okay, comments, thoughts?
Well, the idea of reducing the parking is to make the construction cost lower. That's the general objective, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
So
And what happens to that land? Like, do they build more units? Is it green space? What happens to the land that doesn't have parking on it?
I mean, I think what we've seen in some of the recent developments, so the 510 Bowen Island Trunk Road and Snug Cove House, both had plans where they could have built more parking on the land, and it was more an economic decision. So 510 Bowen Island Trunk Road, that apartment building, is actually built below the maximum density permitted on the lot. And they essentially found it not economical to build the amount of building that they were allowed. I mean, in part because of the parking. And so if you look at where it actually is, it's like, well, a bigger parking area could have been excavated out of the, like they could have pushed the development back more and had a larger parking lot, and it would have cost more. And probably the same with Snug Cove House. Like they had an original design that had come to council. They got variances for some stuff, but not parking, that essentially had a larger excavated area on the ground floor. So they have a ground floor that is, great at grade entrance and then goes into the hillside. And they had a larger excavated area. And to help like the finances of the project, they reduced how much they excavated. So they, the upper floors are the same size and they've excavated less on the bottom. So the parking variance was to cut their construction costs, but didn't lead to more units. Whereas I would say probably the Birch one, like if they could not have received a parking variance, they would have to build less units.
Pardon, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Is Birch and Snug Cove, are they both for old people or are they for anybody?
Snug Cove House is supportive housing for seniors, and
Yeah.
the Birch, I mean now the Lookout project, but at the time Birch was the lead, is for anybody. Yeah.
Okay. Because there's certainly a different, practically there's a different requirement for young people that may need affordable housing, but may need a car to go to their construction job or whatever on the island, because public transportation is hopeless. But, like a pensioner who lives in Snug Cove is not going to be racing around in a car. So realistically, they're not going to need cars. I just worry that we are, I agree with this, but we are very hampered by the lack of parking in Snug Cove. And it's, goodness knows how, because most people or many people don't live in an area where they can take public transit, or if they're late on the ferries, the buses don't run. So they're hooped. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what we're going to do, but that's a side thing. But the affordable.
When I brought this to council, I think that was a lot of the discussion was about general parking in Snug Cove, and recognizing that, in the last 4 years, I guess, like we've developed essentially what used to be two municipal parking lots in Snug Cove, right? One for the apartment building and one for the health center. And I say, as a whole, probably people are, it seems like that's a good thing to have a health center on Bowen and have housing for people on Bowen. But it does have knock-on effects in terms of parking.
Yeah, I actually have a question. Just because the required parking spaces are reduced, doesn't necessarily mean that people don't buy cars. So looking at the apartment building, for example, don't tenants park like over on Village Drive, that parking lot there?
I mean, that was definitely some of the variance rationale, was that they would be able to provide parking spaces for tenants in the Village Square overflow parking lot, which I don't know how much happens in practice.
Okay.
Yeah,
I-
I mean, I do think overall, like, I think that building has been a challenge with parking.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly because there's commercial in the bottom of that building. I noticed that, whether it's first thing in the morning or you come home on one of the late ferries, that little tiny seniors lane, right? It's narrow and it's
Jammed.
parked solidly on both sides. And I was sitting, the only time I'm really looking at what's going on is when I'm sitting in the ferry line, but I was on the hill there not recently. And down at the bottom, there was somebody in the coming off the ferry traffic lane, parked delivering to Tippy. So that lane was blocked in front of the library. And then there was this poor guy with his van and his dolly taking supplies over to Integrated Health as the ferry line's heading down the hill. It's nuts. So when I was reading this, I was thinking it's like it's shifting the responsibility for parking from the developer to the municipality. And maybe that's okay, but it seems to me that is this a bylaw they're doing or with that it needs to be done in concert with a wider plan for how we're going to deal with parking in the cove? And that's commercial, it's visitors, it's residents, it's the whole mishmash of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, is that something that maybe we want to say or that we're supportive of this reduction for affordable housing, but
Yeah.
with a big but, and give some feedback to council, but we're concerned with the lack of parking Bowen and or in the Snug Cove area, and would like something a bigger, you had a nicer words, but look at it in bigger picture.
A more comprehensive plan for parking.
Yeah, parking, yeah.
That we can start trying to plan for and implement, raise
Yeah.
money, budget
Like
for.
the Copper Distillery approval was just insane as far as I can see.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, and it makes sense to have a consistent policy from that point of view.
Yeah.
So each project's not, a one-off, but I mean, Daniel gave quite a few links and I did some of my own sort of what are best practices and looking at what other communities are doing. And yeah, they're basically you have to have public parking somewhere else to offset it.
Mm-hmm. So are we happy to say that we're supportive of the reduction in requirement for affordable housing units? Is that
Yes.
everyone's okay with that?
Yeah, I am. But again, I guess I worry a little bit about sometimes that depending on where the site is, like if it's another place that comes in Snug Cove and we're reducing the parking yet again, and we're kind of out of parking, excess parking in Snug Cove, that could be problematic. So I don't know what a good way is to capture that feeling, but I mean, I think that maybe the first point addresses that adequately.
Likewise, I think if the affordable housing happens to be over by Grafton Lake, would the same rationale make sense? Or would somebody living much farther from the cove actually need the parking?
Exactly.
I think that's a very good comment, because it isn't walkable from Grafton Commons.
Or Seymour Bay.
Or Seymour Bay, no. Well, Grafton Commons at least has a bus occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember Betty once meeting with people who were planning not even planning, they were discussing an affordable housing project that was like quite a long ways off a bus route, far outside the cove. And they kind of jumped in the meeting to immediately discussing how could we support it through things like parking variances. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's something we can discuss, but functionally, how are how are the people who live there accessing anything without it's like, it's one thing to say, is this a municipal burden placed on it, versus it's like, how is your project functioning day to day? Like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
maybe we should put, not put depending on the location, but put if it's in the Snug Cove Village. There's a description of it, isn't there, Daniel?
You
What
mean
it-
geographic reference is where the affordable housing is being built?
If it
Well,
is
it's just in
within,
the cove.
if within walking distance of
Distance.
Snug Cove, is that what we are trying to say?
Yeah, but isn't there a, isn't it called something?
Snug Cove Village Plan, I think,
Yeah.
isn't it?
there's a village boundary in the OCP.
Yeah,
And is that a
it's pretty
reasonable?
generous, I think, isn't it, Daniel? Like in terms of walkability?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find it on a map quickly here.
Because I think that's right, if we can give a boundary, like a,
Mm-hmm.
And you can functionally exist without a car in the village, in Snug
Yeah.
Cove proper. Um,
except for that a lot of the jobs that are the lower paying jobs are going to be construction and they have to get to work.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
but the employer can make arrangements for someone to be picked up in the cove, and I think there's a workable way around that. And it's not that we don't have transit on the island, Kirsty. We do have transit on the island. People do take transit to work.
Nowhere near me, that's why I,
Nor near me.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
But so maybe that's the caveat, is like proximity to transit routes. Like, I live by the Legion. There are people around me with no cars. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Uh,
If it is within the Snug Cove Village boundary or within proximity to transit,
Yeah, I think that.
does that capture that?
I mean, it's up to the person who is moving into the affordable house to determine whether or not it's suitable to their needs.
Well, for sure, but if it's going to be realistic, affordable housing that's accessible to a lot of people, it's got to be accessible physically, as
Yeah.
well as monetarily.
And it's expensive to build parking into a development. So
so
how
I
do you achieve
get it.
affordability?
Yeah.
Without some concession.
Yeah. But I think I like the way we've limited that, but I'm going to have to take off pretty quickly.
Okay.
Unfortunately, and I'm conscious that when I do that, we will no longer have quorum.
Okay. Well, so is everyone comfortable with this? Do we feel we need to add anything?
I feel like the second one just needs to start with something else.
The APC, we can't recommend, I don't think.
Recognizes?
You can
Recognizes the need to start planning for more need to develop a more comprehensive plan for parking in Snug Cove as parking in Snug Cove as I'd like to add something that's mucked up now, like it's
The APC recognizes the need to develop and implement a more comprehensive plan for parking in Snug
Yes.
Cove.
Yeah,
Perfect.
remove start. They've certainly started.
Yeah.
I wonder if, I don't know if we want to be that specific, but that notion that this decision basically shifts parking to a municipal responsibility. Like there's money involved in this decision. That's the trouble.
It's going to cost the muni. Yeah. Actually, I think a comment that we recognize that the reduction in requirement for parking will result in the municipality taking on the partial burden of developing housing or developing parking. That's not a very well worded. But
Yeah, it's basically what it's doing.
Hmm.
is everyone comfortable with something like that, or can word it better?
And that assumes the person moving into the affordable apartment in Snug Cove is doing so with a car. And I don't know that that's always going to be the case.
May result
Or-
in,
Yeah.
It's, yeah,
but
I
that,
mean, still
that,
visitors and, you know.
yeah.
It's not just the person there. I know that, you know, in the city now, often, at least with the strata properties, people have the opportunity to buy parking spots if they want to. So this
yeah.
doesn't actually limit the developer, right? They could still build more parking spaces if they wanted to.
Yes.
Sorry, was I correct in adding the word financial here? I thought I heard it. I might have missed it, but I can take it out.
Well, it is a financial burden. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's not just a planning burden. It's a real.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
And you want to keep partial?
Yeah, do we need on the partial?
You can
How
take
about
that.
a financial burden for developing parking?
Yes, that sounds good.
Sorry, I just didn't hear that bit. Was it
Just
take?
A financial, take out the partial, replace it with a.
A.
Sorry.
Financial burden. Perfect.
For
For
developing
developing parking.
Okay, I've got to run, guys.
Okay,
Um,
We need to move and move.
does
and
Brenda,
second.
do you want to move it?
Sure, yes, please. I will move it so I can move it.
Okay.
Good luck.
Seconder? I don't see anyone. I can't see pictures.
Okay,
So,
Betty.
okay, Betty, and all in favor? Can someone see
Aye.
hands? Okay,
Thanks, everybody.
okay. And I
Thanks,
think we're
Brenda.
okay. We're not just rushing this through, are we, Betty and Richard?
No, I think
You're
we've talked,
comfortable?
don't have anything
I'd
else. to-
say more, but I think that's enough.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. I'm so sorry that I completely blanked on this. I was late.
No worries. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brenda.
Good night.
Good
Night.
night.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, and I think that that's all we have. There was some information items, and that's it. So
Yeah.
no,
Excellent.
so who wants to move that we end?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
Okay, good night, everyone.
thanks. Good night.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Christy, for chairing.
Oh, sorry. I would have thought about it and remembered what I had to do. I know.